The Cartier Santos Car is a classic, but I can't possibly ignore that the Patek Philippe Ellipse represents more value. The question is a matter of taste. Do you prefer one or the other? But Patek Philippe brand has so much more weight than Cartier. I mean, am I right? What is up, Watch fam? I am Christian, the curator of the Theo and Harris Watch Shop. Today's episode is sponsored by our friends over at Chef IQ. More on them later. Today, we are talking about all of the watches out there that I was crawling through on Chrono24 and on the internet that you should consider before you even vaguely consider Rolex's new 1908. I know that many of you aren't even, which is kind of my point of today's episode. But there's so many amazing watches out there from JLC, from IWC, from Patek Philippe that at a fraction of the price of this new 1908 that I'm sure dealers are going to be trying to push on many of you people out there. I think those watches represent a hell of a lot more value, and I did the digging, so it makes it a little bit easier for you. Generally speaking, people don't want solid 18-karat yellow gold watches with 18-karat yellow gold bracelets. There's really only one significant exception to that more general rule, and it is Rolexes. It is Rolex sports models, Submariner primarily, GMT fine, but really day-date. Now, the Sky Dweller has piggybacked off of it, sure, but that's it. Other than those watches, you really don't see adoption from other brands. One, because 18-karat yellow gold watches in full are really expensive. So, there's only a certain amount of buyers even, and those buyers do tend to kind of, flock to this one particular aesthetic, right? The more money a watch costs, the higher burden it is for the brand, right, to convince you to buy it. So with a burden so large, it's hard to actually bring people across that finish line. That's why you do see other brands, almost all brands do have their options in full 18-karat golds, white, rose, yellow, yes, but they're super limited production. Not because they're so hard to make, which they are, but that's not why. It's because who the hell's going to buy them? And inevitably, those watches depreciate like tanks, and it's across the board. Now, you see a little bit more success with head-only watches, like from Panerai or IWC, but once you add that bracelet on, it becomes very, very difficult. So, let's talk about the watch itself and now some other options. The watch measures in 39 millimeters. It's a little bit thick at 9.5. It's certainly not an ultra-thin watch. I do love that it has sapphire case back. I think that's an amazing, option there. I think that's really, really cool. Beautiful movement. I think it's great. $33,400 is not cheap. No. It's not as expensive, obviously, as some of the other Rolexes and precious metals, but it's certainly not cheap. I do think the design's a little bit wonky. Again, I don't know who's asking for this watch, but that's what it is. So now we're going to talk about a couple of watches that, if you were interested, right, if you were the target demo for a kind of a dress watch with, an elegant dress watch with a solid yellow gold case and bracelet, which again, not too many buyers for that, relatively speaking. But if you are that, then what are the other watches that we could talk about? Well, the first one is Patek Philippe's Ellipse. The Ellipse has been manufactured for decades. There are so many different variations, different bracelet styles, different case sizes, and they start around, again, on bracelet, around $11,000, and they'll go up from there. You'll find them in the mid-20s, but they start around $11,000. That is 1/3 the price of this 1908, and I think that, frankly, it's 1/3 of the price, and even all things equal, these watches are incredible, maybe even better proportion. They're certainly smaller. They're certainly more wearable. Then they have more elegance because they are so much smaller. Obviously, the 39 millimeter case size, plus it's a lot of dial, not as much case, right? So it's a big 39, right? I think that, that is going to definitely be a limiting factor for a whole world of people that, maybe are on the market for a yellow gold watch, but that's going to be a big one. I think you're going to see more limited adoption in Asia, which is a really big market for super expensive watches. The Asian market, it really has a big appetite, not only in general, but also like for like creme de la creme. They're really some of the best, most tasteful, and kind of richest buyers out there. They are generally the early adopters to like the most luxe, most high-end offerings from the brands. It's really cool to see, actually. So the Ellipse kind of answers that. It's thinner, it's manually wound. The bracelets are equally, if not more so, interesting, and the proportions are more conservative. So I think the Ellipse really is, in many ways, kind of the answer. Even furthermore, Patek just reintroduced their Ellipse on bracelet maybe like 2 years ago, a year or two ago. So it's funny that Rolex's Cellini is kind of chasing in that wake. Really weird. You don't usually see Rolex chasing in the wake. Another great watch here, Cartier Santos Car. Prices really depend on these watches due to condition, because the case and bracelet are finished and brushed and polished, finishing. It's really evident if this watch has been beaten up or worse, polished. So prices range from $18,000 to about $25,000, generally speaking, for the standard, model. This is very famously the Gordon Gekko watch, I think one of the greatest Cartiers of all time. Fabulous watch. Again, let's say $22,000. That is a hell of a lot cheaper than the 1908 at $33,500. Furthermore, I think there is a much higher likelihood of appreciation in the Carré than the almost certain depreciation in the 1908, which I do think is of note. The Carré, like the Ellipse, will always be a kind of an icon. What are the odds that the 1908 in solid yellow will be an icon? What are the odds the 1908 in solid yellow will be, like truly memorable 10, 15, 20, 30 years from now as, era defining? The Ellipse was, the Carré was. These things are more kind of sure bets. And frankly, all things being equal, I still think that the Ellipse at, $12,000 is a watch that a lot of people that are considering Carrés should consider. 12 to 22 is a huge difference of cash, and again, the Patek Philippe brand definitely has more cachet even than the Cartier brand. So you got to give it to them. Today's episode is sponsored by our friends over at Chef IQ. I actually just gave another Chef IQ away to a cousin of mine this weekend because they are the perfect gift. Chef IQ is the definitive wireless meat thermometer. It comes in 1, 2, and 3 prong configurations. I used my Chef IQ to cook these 2 beautiful porterhouses over Easter weekend. I used my Chef IQ in a sous vide not a month ago. You can also use your Chef IQ in your oven. You can use it everywhere in your repertoire. Chicken, fish, steak, lamb, everything you could possibly want to do. Chef IQ will make sure that your cooking time is perfect, that your understanding of the internal temperature of your meat is exact, that you know when to pull it out, how long to have it rest. And that's not even it. Through their app, which is so easy to use, you just download it and immediately hooks up. It's amazing. They have so many recipes that help you really bring that perfectly cooked meat to life. I promise you, I could not possibly recommend Chef IQ more. I use it weekly, and that may be an understatement, maybe twice a week. It is unbelievable. Head over to Chef IQ for yourself or for a gift. You will absolutely never regret it. JLC, taking a look at their Reverso collection. JLC has more references, than Imelda Marcos had shoes, right? It's ridiculous. But they're out there, right? There are JLC Reversos between $13,000 and $25,000 on solid yellow gold or rose gold bracelets. The construction of those bracelets, unbelievable. And one thing that you're going to get with the JLC Reverso that you get a little bit with the Cartier, don't get it all with the Ellipse, but one thing you're going to get here is like a chunk. It is sporty, decidedly. The Reverso on leather, it's easy to forget that it's a sports watch, right? The Reverso was introduced in 1931 as a polo player's watch. This was a watch to play sports with. Today, we look at this as a dress watch. And it really does become more apparent on bracelet how sporty it is. Yeah, elegant, refined, but a tank, an absolute tank that's ready to take a beating. And I think in their complication and in time only. Complications are power reserve, complications are moon phase, day, date. There are a lot of complications in options, but also even in time only. These watches are fabulous to consider when put beside the 1908. And I think the price delta is, even at $25, which is the high end for these watches, and they can be had a lot cheaper, I think it even makes a more compelling argument than the 1908. And the proportions are remarkable. I mean, I'd love to be wearing one right now. And I love my date here, but I would love to be wearing that watch right now. Not a question. Now, there's a whole world of watches out there that achieve what the kind of origin of the 1908, the Cellini. Now, pivoting a little bit onto gold dress watches, because the 1908 is now being offered on bracelet, but not too long ago, right, from all history, time immemorial, the Cellini, which is the predecessor to the 1908, was filled with, elegant dress watches, leather strap, even into the 1908. Leather strap was the introduction, right? And I do think that more people, and I always am encouraging more and more people to look at those pieces. Again, when you add the bracelet, it becomes, the burden to sale is so much higher. You need to really, really convince somebody that this is really, really good and worth their money. But without bracelet, when you go on strap, it's much easier to convince someone that a yellow gold dress watch would fit really well into their collection. Yellow gold, white gold, pink gold, etc. And I recommend a couple of different brands, a couple of different watches all the time. I recommend Longines. Fabulous brand, great construction quality. We've done this before. Yellow and pink mostly. Every once in a while, white, yes. You also see Patek Philippe, obviously more expensive. In the reference 96, for example, you're talking about, anywhere between $12,000 and $15,000. Very small though, at 31-ish millimeters in diameter. Great design. I'd wear one in a second, but very small. Another watch, shameless plug here, from IWC. There is something about that signature, that cursive signature, International Watch Company, Schaffhausen, that I think is so elegant, so bold, so strong, and their designs were very simple, but very detailed, right? Very defined. The one that we have in the shop right now, this vintage manually wound piece with this beautiful white dial with a running second hand, which you don't usually see in a lot of these wristwatches, right? That center second hand. It's a fabulous watch. Coming on a brown alligator strap really makes it very rich and elegant. You could put this on suede, and it's fabulous. For me, and everyone knows that this is true, I've been talking about this on the internet basically for the last 10 years. Not that anyone needs any watches. These are all ridiculous, and they're totally antiquated, blah, 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 blah. But while I'd love to see you in yellow gold bracelets, that is true. The truth is, they're not where I recommend people go. They're too expensive. It's ridiculous. I'd much rather see you in something that you're going to be more likely to adopt. You're going to be more likely to feel guilt-free about. You're going to be more likely to take a splurge on, right? And that is yellow gold, my favorite metal, on a leather strap from a brand with class and cachet. And while I love Patek Philippe and I love Vacheron Constantin, I can't in good conscience recommend those watches as aggressively as I do pieces from Longines, pieces from IWC, pieces from Omega, even a little bit different in design language, but even from Omega. These are the watches that we built this company on, really, as from a retail perspective, because I believe in their value offering so much. So I digress. If vintage isn't your style, if those watches are too small, right, and I don't think they should be, but if they are, also take a look at the modern examples. Now, we don't have one in the shop, so you can't be supporting us when you buy, which is perfectly fine. But go look at modern IWC Portuguese watches. If you have a big wrist and you really want to wear something larger, around $10,000, which is a lot of money, but it's less than a steel sub, you can get a magnificent IWC Portuguese time only or with power reserve, and with a big sapphire case back and a beautiful movement. And I think the value on those watches is absurd as well. So, needless to say, in summation, blah, 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 blah. Take a look at yellow gold, add some precious metal to your life. I don't think the 1908 is a hit. I don't think anyone was asking for it, but I do think there are other hits out there on the pre-owned market with bracelets. And if you want to come to the dark side more quickly and want to go on leather strap and add elegance to your life, take a look at that IWC, take a look at the Theo & Harris Vintage Watch Shop, and I'll see you all soon.